With the help of Hashem, we are learning Sukah Daf Yud Gimel. We left off on Daf Yud Gimel, Amud Aleph, 8 lines from the top of the Amud. We are referring back to the rule that we learned in the Mishnah on Daf Yud Beis, that one rabbinically is not allowed to use bundles as chach, as we learned Gezeiras Oitzer, and now we have to define better what's a bundle. And as the Gemara already gave us a couple of examples, and we will continue with that a natural bundle is not deemed a halachic bundle. Furthermore, how many items do we need to put together for that to be rendered into a bundle? One item is not a bundle. As we'll see, 3 certainly is considered a bundle. What about number 2? 2 items are tied together. Is that called a bundle or not? And the source for that will be concerning the various instances in the Torah that we use a ezoiv, the hyssop plant. Actually, as we'll speak out, there are 4 times in the Torah, in halacha, in mitzvahs, that the ezoiv is used. The Torah refers to it as agudas ezoiv, and we will actually learn a machlokes tanoim as to how many of these plants do we need to put together for it to be considered a bundle, and that will be the source for our halachas regarding this rabbinic prohibition of using a bundle for schach. We're going to be speaking about the phenomenal concept that we will have a little bit later in the Masechta, and that is as follows. When you have a sukkah, and now that we already established that there is a minimum amount of walls that you need for a sukkah. So guys, just imagine that you have a 3-walled sukkah. But mamash in middle of the sukkah, just as an example, there is a gap. 0 schach from one end to the other. How much empty avir gap do we need for us to consider these 2 areas as to 2 separate sukkahs? And if that, the moment you make one sukkah into 2, especially if you only began with 3 walls, then each sukkah will only have 2 walls, if you can imagine that. So the rule is like this: when it comes to avir, empty, nothing, only 3 tfachim or more of avir separates and invalidates, in our case, the sukkah. What happens if you were to have invalid schach, same thing that was placed from one end to the sukkah of the other on the top? There the halacha is that you need to have 4 tfachim of invalid schach to invalidate a sukkah. And we'll speak out the reason for it. Why? This is going to be a sugya that we're going to learn in a few daf from now. But what we will learn today is that you have certain materials that we can use for schach, or that one might have used for schach, that isn't only considered invalid schach, but it's considered as if it's not there. Non-existent schach. And once schach is not existent, like we just spoke out, a gap of avir invalidates a sukkah only with 3 tfachim. If there is physical schach, but it's only invalid, then you need to have 4 tfachim of such schach to invalidate the sukkah. And again, we'll have this anomaly, we'll have this exception of having an item that is really only invalid schach, but halachically we will view it as non-existing schach. And the final topic that we will learn today is going to be as follows. And we're going to go me'inyan le'inyan. First of all, haboitzer legas. That means if someone is harvesting grapes for the wine press, which means that they don't need for the grapes to have the stems on them. Now there's a whole Masechta Yados that speaks about the power of a handle. Yad means a handle, which will mean regarding a natural fruit, the stem or the branch right near the fruit that people use as a means through which to hold on, to move the fruits. So handles have the power to convey tumah. Handles become conduits to tumah. What happens if someone is going to harvest grapes, but they don't want to handle it or sell clusters? They're going to bring it into the wine press. You don't want for there to be anything other than grapes in the wine press. Since it's loy nichale, for there to be those handles, they are no longer considered handles. And similarly, coming now to schach, now that we established that something that's mekabel tumah is not valid schach, oichel is mekabel tumah, is susceptible to becoming tummy. So if one were to harvest stalks of grain, now the straw part, which is not oichel, is fantastic for schach. Grain is invalid for schach. Even though the halacha will be that if in one stalk you have majority psoilus, you have majority straw, the food part is in the minority, it's bottle, and you are allowed to use all of it as schach, but really you don't want for there to be grain there. Grain is a negative when it comes to schach. So we're going to speak about what will be the din. Will we consider now the straw as yadois? Will they still be a conduit to tuma? Or since we don't even want the food to be there, we don't need for there to be straw connected to the food, so the straw loses its status of a handle. And that's going to lead us into a much broader topic, and that is that when you are taking a raw material and you're making it into a keli, so there are many times that just your intention will upgrade it into a completed article. So you're taking hide, and you don't know yet whether you're going to make it into a pair of shoes or whether you're going to use the hide as a mat. And the hide is processed enough to be a mat, but it's not yet processed for it to be a shoe. If you just intend, you know what, I'm going to use this as a mat, your intention creates this item, makes this item halachically to be considered a completed item, and now it's susceptible to becoming tummy. What happens if you change your mind? If you say, you know what, I'm not going to use it as a mat, I want to make it into a pair of shoes. Question is, can machshava take away the susceptibility of tuma that was already imbued in this item or not? Do we need to have a maisa to be moitzi midei maisa oy midei machshava? Or can even a machshava be moitzi midei machshava? All of that will be connected to this topic of a person harvesting, intending to use it for schach, or you change your mind, you harvested it for food, now you want to use it for schach. That's going to be all connected to the sugya of how powerful are our intentions. Chavra, let us start on Daf Yud Gimel Amud Aleph. We left off 8 lines from the top of the Amid. Again, we're speaking about the Mishnah taught us that rabbinically, one may not use a bundle for schach. How do you define a bundle? Amar Rav Chizda, Amar Avina Bar Shila, Hani doikrei dekane, stalks of cane plants. They have numerous pointed stalks growing out from one place. In other words, it's like a natural bundle. They are bound together because on one end they're all one. But then as they go away from the ground or away from the tree, they start to separate into different little shoots. So says Rab Chizda, in the name of Rabbi Bar Shila, that yes, misachichin bohu, you are allowed to use them for schach. They were not included in this gezerah de Rabbanan, gezerahs oitzer, not to use bundles for schach, because afal gav da agida ninu, even though they are taka bound by their base. Eged b'dei shamayim, since it's a natural binding, as we learned yesterday, lo yishmei eged, it's not deemed a halachic bundle, and even more than that, furthermore, afal gav da hadar aged lahu, even if you're going to take the other end, in where the shoots are already separated, and you're going to want to bring it more together, and you're going to take a rope, and you're going to bind it from that side, it's still not going to be a problem, because since before you added its binding, it was already considered bechad, you are already binding something that halachically is considered a single object, iged bechad, lo yishma eged. As we spoke out, we don't need aguda by Yidin because we are already one, so to say. So of course it's a mitzvah to make our connection even greater, but we're not a bundle. It's more than that, we're taka one. Tanya nami achi. Says the Braisa. Now the initial reading is kanim v'doikranim. Cane stalks. Doikranim is some sort of tapered pole. We'll see that's not the meaning of the Braisa. So says the Braisa, you can use them for schach. Says the Gemara, kanim, of course, why would you not be allowed to use kanim? Of course you can use cane. Ella, the gears and the Braisa is kanim shel doikranim. Mamish the same thing, that you have some sort of stalk that's coming out of the cane plant, that on one end and on one side it's one, but then it becomes separated. A very, very good picture. So therefore you might consider this into a bundle, and that's the word of the Brais already. No, that eged b'dei shamayim is lo yishmei eged. Baruch atah adino Eloheinu melech haolam sha'ar kol dvarim. Continues the Gemara quoting the same Amoira. Ve'amar Rab Chizda, Amar Avina Bar Shila. Honey miror riso da agma, mutter that grows at a marsh. As we'll see in a moment, it's really not considered a type, a unique variety of mutter. It's a mutter, it's a type of classical lettuce, chazeres mutter. It's pashut found more by marshes. That's one of its natural places where it grows. And they used to call it marsh Marair, Adam Yoitze Behem Yedei Chavase B'Pesach. Guys, if you remember, Psachim, we had the Mishnah that enumerated the 5 species that are good for Marair. This is included in the 5. Fragting a Marair, 1 second. The very fact that it has a unique name, it's not called Marair Stam, it's called Marair Da'agma. Did we not learn? And now we're going Me'ingen Le'ingen. In Mishnayis Negoyim, when we have in the Torah the usage of Ezov, which is someone showed a picture before. It looks a little bit like a lavender. It's called hyssop. Now, just to make it clear that where do we have the usage of Ezov 4 times? You have it concerning the burning of the Para Aduma, that while you're burning it in the Para, you have to put some Ezov. You have it when it comes very often to the sprinkling of the Meichatos on someone who needs to have those water sprinkled on them. So the one who's doing the sprinkling takes Ezov, dips it into the water, and he uses agudas Ezov to sprinkle the water on the tamei. You have, when it comes to sprinkling the blood on the Metzora, that's in the beginning of his tahara, where you took the 2 birds, you shechted 1 bird, you took the living bird, you dipped it into the water, including in that is Ezov, and as a one-time usage of Ezov is when we were in Mitzrayim and God commanded us Kiyadua to put the Dam Pesach, and the Midrash adds, and the Dam Bris on the mezuzahs and the mashkaif. It wasn't done with our fingers, but we also use an Ezov. So the Ezov that has to be used, says the Mishnah, is simple hyssop, and not the unique type of Ezov known as Greek Ezov, not blue Ezov, loy Ezov Yavan, v'loy Ezov Keichali, v'loy Ezov Midbari, not a unique type of Ezov known as desert Ezov, not Roman Ezov, nor v'loy Ezov sheyesh loy shem levoi, any type of plant that is not called by its name stam, but there is an accompanying name, that means it's a certain type of subspecies. Don't use a subspecies. So the question is, the very fact that this Marar is not called Marar Stam, but it's called Marar Da'agma, should this not make it into some sort of subspecies of Chazeres? And why would it be valid? It should be invalid. Amar Abaye, the 2 answers. Answer number 1, that if you have different varieties of a product, and they were already given different names at the time of the giving of the Torah, and the Torah dafka chooses one of the names or the general name, thus excluding those different types of varieties, because the Torah didn't say that you can use them. The Torah didn't say take Ezov Yavan v'chulei. Take Ezov. Ubasa Torah v'kvidoleh b'yadua sheyesh le'shem levoi, that the Torah is excluding the ones that have a shem levoi. But when it comes to Marar, interestingly, a historical fact, since when at the time that the Torah was given, no one called the Marar that grows in the marshes that Merarisa Da'agma. It wasn't called then with that name. So at the time the Torah was given, it was then called Marar Stam. So therefore it's included in the Marar. Says Rav, I'll give you a different answer. When do we exclude Ezov and not Greek Ezov? Now, I don't know if they're going to have it here in the pictures, but it's a different variety. It's a distinct variety. The Marar that grows in the marshes is not a distinct Marar. It happens to be that because of the soil conditions near a swamp, the Marar grows there more than in other places. But it's the same variety of Marar that grows even in a non-marsh area. It's the same type. It's really the same of any other Marar Stam. The reason why people give it this accompanying name is simply because it's where it's found more than in other places. Mishum the mishtakach ba'agma, because it's found in a swamp. Let's go weiter. Amar Rab Chizdam, says Rab Chizdam. Now that we established, going back to the din of a bundle, how many items need to be there bundled, for you to say, that's not a good k'schach, iged b'chad lo yishmei eged. That's clear. If you have one item and you're going to just tie a rope around it, that's nothing. Shalosh, if you have 3 items or more and you bind them for sure, that's called an eged, that's called a bundle. What about 2? Shnayim, machlokes Rabbi Yossi v'Rabbanan. Where do we find this machlokes? Not in Beneged din Sukah, but going back Beneged din Ezoif. There, as we mentioned right now, that the Torah says, for example, that when one will take the mechatas and sprinkle it on a tamei, ulakachtem agudas Ezoif. The Torah uses the words bundle. How many plants do you need to have bound together for you to be fulfilling the agudas Ezoif? Machlokes Tanoim. It says in the Mishnah in Parah, mitzvahs Ezoif is to take shaloisha kelachim, guys, a kelach, a sprig is the entire plant. And as it goes away from the ground, it becomes more divided, but we're going to focus on the stem, on the source. Ubahem, what we really care about is there should be shaloisha give oilim. A give oil is a stem. Which if you want to take, you have to begin, or it's a mitzvah to begin, with 3 separate stems. Rabbi Yossi says, mitzvahs ezoif shloisha givoilim, but if you began with 3, and now vishiyarav, but as you were using it, you were sprinkling it, one of them completely went to the side, you only have 2, that's also fine. Vishiyarav can be shnayim. Furthermore, what about the length of each one of the kalachim? You began with them, they were very tall. You only have to remain with 2. And even the 2, they don't need to be very tall. We tolerate them losing their height as long as you have something left in the bottom. The gardumav, it's called a stub. Even if it's being eaten up or it's crumbling away, as long as from the shnayim you have from each one kol shehu, that's good enough. Now, what exactly is the Shitas Chachamim? That's something the Gemara now is going to clarify. The initial understanding of the Mishnah in Parah is that since Rabbi Yossi says midishi yarav shnayim, since he says that at the end of the day ending up with 2 is fine, that's the Havamina. Really, b'tchilasi namashtayim, you can even begin with 2. Why did Rabbi Yossi say mitzvahs ezoif shloisha? All it meant was it's better, of greater preference, but it's not essential. The haidik tani shloisha, it's only limits. That understanding of Rabbi Yossi will now give us an insight as to what is the sheet of the Tanach. Umid Rabbi Yossi shloisha lemitzvah. So the Havamina is that the Rabbanan are more machmir. And they holds that not only do you have to begin with 3, you have to always have at least 3. Shloisha la'akiv, and by the way, that's what he meant to say. So k'moi, there's a machlokes over there by Ezoif. Similarly, even though we're speaking only about a rabbinic law, but the Chachamim did say that you may not take a bundle and put it on your sukkah, even though you're putting it l'shem mitzvah sukkah. So here we have the same machlokes, Rabbi Yossi and Chachamim. How do you define a bundle? And the Gemara is going to say that you misunderstood the sheet of the Chachamim. It's correct. The link is correct. However, each one defines a aguda by an ezoif. Similarly, they will apply the same din of a bundle by a sukkah, but you got it wrong. Frek the Gemara, no. We learned in another brayso. Rabbi Yossi says ezoif. The Bach adds the letter shin. Shet chilasi shnayim. Rabbi Yossi holds that if you begin with 2, and now or even if you began with 3. But now that you're using it and it's crumbling away, it's falling to the side, Vishiyarav is only 1, it's possible. Here Rabbi Yossi says clearly what he holds. You have to begin with 3. Once you began with 3, then yes, then we tolerate a certain amount of loss as long as you still end up with 2 give oilam. Vishiyarav shnayim. So clearly, Rabbi Yossi holds that lechatchila you have to begin with 3. You can't say that shitas chachamim, but there is a machlokes. So indeed, so epach Rabbi Yossi starting out with 3 is la'akev. Yes, once you started out with 3, you can end up with 2. What do the chachamim hold? The chachamim are more lenient. The chachamim hold that a bundle is really 2. You only need 3 lemitzvah. Once you say that, then the Chachamim are the more machmer. It means if you have two that were bundled together, the Chachamim will hold that the sukkah is not kosher, and Rabbi Yossi will hold it is kosher. And now this v'hatanya is benichusa, and I'll prove it to you that yes, we properly did understand the Chachamim. The Chachamim are the ones that hold that 3 is only l'mitzvah fakert. You can start even with 2. Where do we see that? What's the other brayso? 3 lines from the bottom. Eizoiv again with a shin shet chilasoi shnayim. If you began with 2. And now v'shiyar of echad, kosher. Ve'eino pasul, at sheyeit chilasoi v'shiyar of echad. It's only invalid if you begin with 1, or if you remain with 1. Now that last word doesn't work. Frekti Gemara shiyar of echad pasul. Why? You just said that shiyar of echad is kosher. Is if you began with more than 1, you can end up with 1, according to the Tanach Daf Yud Gimel Amud Beis. And indeed, Ela Ema, you have to amend. The Bryce is saying, Ache Teheit Chilosoi, Kishiyarav, when is it invalid? Only if you began with the amount of what you can end up with, meaning with 1. Now, who is the author of this Bryce? It's certainly not Rabbi Yossi, so therefore it makes more sense instead of creating a new Tana. This is the Rabbanan. The Rabbanan said before 3. No, 3 is only la mitzvah. And this Bryce is the Chachamim telling you the Ikar Adin. And the Ikar Adin, what is the minimum? You have to begin with 2. Very good. Weiter. Says the Gemara. Donash Mereimer. More about bundles. Hani Isuri Yasa de Surah. They were called bundles of Surah. What was unique about them, we'll see in a moment. That if you have items that theoretically are kosher for schach, but they're bundled. And one would argue, bundles are not good. No, those bundles, misachchin bohu, they may be used for schach. You need not untie them. V'afagav the agodon, even though they are bound. Right, gezeiras oitzer, says the Gemara, says Mireimar, since in Surah, they were only bound leminyon ba'al malhu da agodon, they were bound only while they were being sold. When people buy items, so they knew that in Surah, a bundle consists of whatever the number is. And that just facilitated that the seller knew how much he's selling, the purchaser knew how many pieces he's purchasing. But it was common in Surah that after the transaction happened, for whatever reason, whatever this type of plant is, they would unbundle it. They would never store it bundled. Never means there's always exceptions, but that was the norm. This is very important. So let's go back. Sometimes once the Chachama make a gzeira loy plug, but that's not the case over here. We have to remember, as we learned yesterday, Rabbi Yechanan, who said gezeiras oitzer, that we clarified was concerning the din of a bundle. The only reason why you may not use bundles for schach is because we are afraid that a person might store bundles, not l'shem sichoch, for storage, and then the person is going to use that oitzer, and that's not going to be valid. But since in Surah these items were never store bundled, there is no fear of gezeiras oitzer, and therefore Mereimer was machadesh. Here in this case of the Rabbanan, if we know the reason is not here, there was lechatchila no gezeira on that scenario. Next, Amar Ababa, another exception where a bundle may be used. Hanei tzirife di urbane. There were huts that were made out of tall willow branches. What pshara huts? Bird hunters, they wanted to be invisible. They would stay in hiding to chop their prey. That's a good picture. Now these long willows were actually tied on the top. If you see a picture, that's mamash a bundle. They were knotted on top, but the bottom wasn't completely hefkervelt. There was a certain amount of braiding that was done in the wider bottom part of this very flimsy conical hut. Now, as it is, that's called an aguda. However, says Rabbi Abba, that all you need to do to be able to use this as chach, kiven shuhutra rashi ma'adanim shalahem, as long as the upper knot was untied, then they are kosher. But didn't you just say that they are braided in the bottom? There is a certain amount of binding in the bottom. Why isn't that considered a a bundle. So Rav Papa, who agrees with Rav Abba, explains that Amar Rav Papa the shari lahu. The shari lahu means it's still braided. It's still braided. But if there was a knot made at the end of the circle on the bottom, taka has to be untied. In other words, there's tying. That's a bundle. Braided is tolerable. Or going back to Gezeras Oitzer, when people would store items, they wouldn't just leave it braided, because when you want to store, you want to use your space to the max. When things are tied together, they're tightly together. When things are only braided, they're more open. They take up more space. We don't want that in storage. People don't store it that way. However, or another answer, that the Amar Afuna in the side, not the Amar, it's the second answer, that Amar Afuna B'rei Rabbi Yeshua, Afilu Temidolei Sharalahu. I will tell you that Rabbi Abba meant to teach you taka b'diyuk. Only the top has to be untied. Even if you left the bottom rope not only braided, but even tied to an end, oichet good. You know why? Because kol eged she'eino asil l'taltaloi. Any bundle that's not made in a manner that allows you to carry it. In other words, if you were to carry it, even if it's tied, it would be undone. If you saw a picture of that hut, if you take away the knot on the top, you're going to start schlepping it around, the whole thing will fall apart. So since it's not asui l'taltaloi, lo yishmai eged. Lo yishmai eged. Even in human nature, sometimes people are united, they're bundled together, but once there's a tiltle, once there is movement, it's a very weak union. Things fall apart. A bundle means take a bundle, connected together. Weiter, says the Gemara, Amar Abba, Amar Shmuel.
Rabbi, so just to be clear, even though it's tied according to this last opinion, you could use it as chach as is while it's tied together?
Only the bottom. You have to, Rabbi Abba says you have to untie the Rashi Madanim. If you can just show the picture again, the top is where it's tied tightly together. In the bottom, it's like it's woven in and out. You just don't want it to completely fall apart in the bottom. So all Rav Abba is saying is that the top has to be untied, whoever sees the picture. According to this latter approach of Rafuna B'rei Rabbi Yeshua, you can fully leave in this red string in the bottom. Not only is it still woven, but it's tied to it, because if the top knot is undone and you start to be metaltal, it's going to fall apart. Weiter. Okay. Amar Abba Bar Shmuel.
Would you say this is connected to the bamboo mats we use these days?
No, because the bamboo mats, that it's asur l'taltaloi. It's asur l'taltaloi. It's not called a bundle. It's not called a bundle the way I understand. We spoke about this yesterday. If we didn't go on the Chabad or camera, is because
it's very similar to the bamboo mats. Here there's like a braid on the bottom. The bamboo mats also has like a tie-on that keeps it together.
The concept of storage is that you have an item and it's positioned in a way that it takes up the minimum space. I would argue maybe that if you have our bamboo mats and they're rolled up and tied in a rolled position, and you put many of them on top of the schach, that will be the bundle issue. Because it's stored that way. When you open up the bamboo mat, you see, if it would be rolled up, not only rolled up and tied in the circle, I think that's called a bundle. The fact that one little bamboo stick is connected to the other, it's not the way you store. Maybe that's the pshat of Isuri Yasa the Surah. That's the pshat over there. So the point is that it's only a problem of a bundle if when people store it the way you put it on your roof. When you go today to Home Depot, you're not going to find the bamboo mats always rolled out. You're going to find them rolled up. That's that. Okay, back over here. Guys, this is amazing. The vegetables, mutter, that they're going back again, twice today. That the Chachamim, this is the Mishnah, Psachim, right, Daflamet test. All of the 5 types of mutter. That Adam Yoitze Behem Yedei Chavasa V'Pesach. And guys, if you remember that the Seder in the Mishnah is Meduyak and the best one is Chazeres, let's speak about lettuce. Now, is lettuce a good schach? You would say, why not? Well, first of all, if it's food, it's problematic simply because it's food. On the other hand, so let's go before we come to the dinim of schach. If you have, remember, a tefach long and a tefach wide, or a larger leaf, and if under that leaf you have the minimum amount, which is a kazayis basar min hameis, that could convey tumas oil, and under the leaf you have another item, adam or keli. So yes, it will convey tumas. Now there's a chiddush to that. You know what the chiddush is? Because these types of products, they're very flimsy. They get dried out very quickly, and not only that, they crumble up and they shrivel up. So one might have argued that something so flimsy, it should, even when it still is the tefach by tefach, maybe it's not considered a halachic covering. So first of all, yes, it is, that as long as it has the minimum shiur, meviim esatuma. But now this is going to be a chumrah midirabanan, since it is very flimsy, since it is very thin. Ve'ein choitzetzin b'pnei atuma. We also learned that if there is in between the surface of the source of tuma and the bottom part of this covering, if there is a tefach or more, it prevents tuma retzutza, that's oil until the rokia. It holds the tuma in. The chachamim were masakein that since this will crumble in a very short amount of time, we don't view it as a gag that is able to stop the tuma from going up. In other words, it's only a oil l'chumra and never l'kula. Biblically, it's considered a gag and a tent and a covering as long as it has the minimum shiurim, but midrabanan we're machmer. Now guys, mother is oichel, right? Oichel is one of the things that is not valid schach. But here we're being mechader something. Upoislen besukah mishum avir. So guys, that's what we will learn just in a few days. And daf yud zayin, just to repeat this is phenomenal. I don't know if there's going to be a picture here, but I'll explain like this. If you have a three-walled sukkah, can you imagine if on the top, if the schach, right, is puzzle or empty from one end until the other end, going in the length, going from the walled side to the open side. There's going to be a point that if there is a complete opening, either of avir, of no schach, or of pasal schach, it makes each side be considered a standalone sukkah. And when you only begin with three walls, if in the center you have a empty or you have pasal schach, then each side is not going to have three walls. As an example, only two walls.
Space have to be more than 3 tvachim.
So like this. So the Gemara there says gavaldik. If the problem is that there is no schach, it's called avir, then we're more machmir. Then only 3 tvachim of empty space considers the two sides to be separate sukkahs. If you have pasal schach, it's not kosher. Only if there's 4 tfachim of pasal schach that goes all the way across do we consider that to separate both sides into a standalone sukkah. Because at the end of the day, when you look up the fact that there is something there, it has more power. You need more pasal schach than open ear schach to invalidate the sukkah. I hope that was clear. Now, food is pasal schach. If that would be the case, then you would say that if you used lettuce, if you use chazeres as schach, and you put them all together, that in the middle of the sukkah, there's many other cases we'll speak out on Yud Zayin, what happens if it's near the wall, there's a doifen akuma, I don't want to get into all the details, just the concept. In the example that we gave, there's a 3-walled sukkah, a mohawk, but the opposite of a mohawk is in the middle, it's shaven. In the middle, there's no schach. So, or there's pasal schach. So he says, Gavaldik, that if you put lettuce, just like the Chachamim were machmer, and they said that it does not create a roof, and therefore it doesn't stop the tumah from going over it. If there's something directly over this lettuce, over the kazayis basar min hameis, it will become tamei, because we look at it as non-existent, because it's going to crumble and dry very quickly. So we won't say that if you use this type of lettuce food for schach, it's only going to be invalid schach. If it would only be classified as invalid schach, which it is, then you would need 4 tfachim for you to separate both sides into a standalone sukkah. And if you would have 3.5 tfachim or 3 tfachim, it would be theoretically kosher, because that's the din, that if you have pasal eschach, you need to have 4 tfachim width to separate the both sides. Here again we're saying that since it's something that's very flimsy and it's going to shrivel up and crumble in a very short amount of time, so we view it as non-existent. We don't say only it's pasal eschach. It's worse. It's non-schach. It's non-existent. And beat it back inside. O poislan besukah mishum avir. Which means if you have 3 tfachim width of this lettuce going from one end to the other, the sukkahs will be invalid. 1 second, why is it invalid? It's pasal eschach. Pasal eschach, you would need to have 4 tfachim, not over here. And my tama, because given the lechi yafshi, since when it will dry, and this will happen quickly, parchi v'nafli, it's going to crumble and fall, is command the leis mudami, we view it as if it's non-existent. Now, I'm speaking theoretically, not halacha lamaisa, but we all are familiar, at least those of us who at least sometimes, instead of only putting the mats, maybe for noye sukkah is to make the schach beautiful. If you're going to put the real foliage, what happens? There are many branches that dry up very quickly. I'm curious to know, there has to be certain natural, foliage. Many foliages, they mamish in 2 days. It became 1/3 of the size. I wonder what the halacha will be. It's mamish like the lettuce. There's got to be a point where you can't say, now I have more shade than sunlight. If tomorrow morning, mamish, if after one hot day in LA, everything is going to shrivel up, then there is a concept in halacha that we say that since the lechi yafshi parchi v'nafli, especially if it's going to, when it dries up, it falls in, then it's command the leis nidami from the beginning. It's not pasal schach, it's non-existent schach. Right. Now, for Omar Rab Abba, Omar Rav Huna, the first statement is not connected to sukkah, but the second one, oy gewalt, is. Step number 1, haboitzer legas, if someone is harvesting grapes only for the purpose of squeezing them for the wine press. Why is that significant? So as we spoke out in the intro, that oichel is susceptible to becoming tamei with all of the rules. It has to be wetted with the knowledge and consent of the owner, with the 7 halachic liquids, etc., etc. Food is susceptible to becoming tamei. Non-food, non-adam, non-keli is not susceptible. And that will include twigs, branches. But when you have, let's say, a cluster of grapes, so the stem, right, that is used to handle the grapes, it's called yadois, handles. A yad, that's a great picture, is a conduit to tumah. It's considered part of the food. Now the question is, what happens if we know that the owner doesn't want the handle? So that's the statement, that when you harvest the grapes legas, and you don't want to have anything other than the grapes, since you don't want it, ein lo yadais, this whole din that handles our conduits to tuma falls to the side. So if the grapes became mukhshar lekabel tuma, and you have a source of tuma, but it touched the handle won't become tamei, the grapes won't become tamei, because it touched something that's not an item that can become tamei. Now Rav Menashe says weiter, Rav Menashe bar Gada, and it says in the name of Rav Huna, let me take the same logic and bring it back to the laws of Sukah. HaKoitzer l'schach, now that we established, food is a invalid schach, because food is something that is susceptible to becoming tamei. One of the items that one may use for schach is pashat stalks of grain. Now, stalks of grain, again, speak it out right now, if the kernels of grain are still in it, is a theoretical problem, but it's not a practical problem. Because we apply the concept of bittul b'roiv, that if you have the whole stalk all the way to the ground, there's a lot more straw in volume than kernels, than food. So we view every stalk as roiv psoilis, miyut oichel, it's bittul b'roiv, but still, even though it's bittul b'roiv, you don't want food, you don't want the kernels there. So he says the same concept, that if you harvested grain only to use it for schach, since, now here it's not that you don't want the stalk, here it's the opposite, you don't want the kernel, but it has the same effect. Since you don't want the kernel, you cannot view the straw as only a handle to the kernel. No, you want the straw. The straw became the ikar. The kernel became almost to your detriment. So it's halachically two different items. A handle means that there is the main, there is something secondary. That which is secondary is subservient. It's used to handle the main. So that connection makes it halachically the same. And therefore it becomes a conduit. Since you don't want the food here, oichet ein lo yadois. Now are these two statements, will each one agree with the other? It's only a one-way street and not a two-way street. Says the Gemara like this. Man da amar koitzer will for sure agree that in the case of boitzer, koitzer is grain and boitzer is grapes. Over there, guys, the stems on the grapes are really detrimental in the winemaking process. It ruins it. It absorbs the wine. It ruins the taste. There is a greater loy nichalei. There, since mamish the loy nichalei, the owner does not want it to be there. Why? The loy nimtziyei lachamrei, because it absorbs the wine. You're going to lose wine. So certainly it will lose its status of yadis. But let's go to the other direction. The one who made the statement, the first one, which is Rab Abi Amar Afuna, that haboitzer she'ein lo yadis, he won't necessarily agree that the same will apply here by the schach. Avol koitzer, maybe yesh lo yadis, because there is a certain advantage of having the kernels there. The nicholei de lisachach, who you really want for the kernels to remain in these pieces of straw. Tosfos learns, because since kernels weigh more than the straw, and we all know when you put schach, what we really don't appreciate Sukah is a shtickle wind blowing your schach away, and therefore the schach having more weight is an advantage. So we know that food is not good for schach. But on the other hand, now that it's taka bottle, beroiv, you want it to be there. So therefore he won't necessarily say that it's loy nicholei to the point where the stalks, where the straw loses its halachic standard, its halachic status of a handle. Okay, but guys, that's okay. But Rav Menashe Bar Gada Amar Afuna does say that hakoitzer l'schach ein lo yodis. Says the Gemara Nema, perhaps. Not only is it that the first Amoira won't agree with Rav Menashe, but maybe the Rav Menashe Bar Gada may be a subject. Maybe this is a machlokes tanoim. And listen to this, the Tanya. If you have, guys, fig branches, this is mamish, the old schach. People cut parts of the tree down and they put it on their sukkah. Now, what happens if this guy had a lot of fig trees? So before sukkahs, he cut down fig branches, but there's still figs in it. Let's use the same principle. Guys, remember, food is invalid schach. But if you have a natural item that its majority is good, not food, then there's bittul beroiv. And therefore this guy didn't bother to take off the figs. That's the braisa, mamish. You have soichet te'enim with te'enim. Same thing, or parchilim. Parchilim are vines, and a lot of vine, but you still left the grapes on it. We're all speaking about schach over here. Or kashin, our topic. You have a straw, stalks, and you left the shibolim, you left the grain in them. Or machabdois, a machabed means a broom, but that's taka the leaves from a date palm. And sometimes you're going to have dates on it. Machabdois v'em tamarim. So what's the rule? You put the schach. The schach has in it psoilus, which is what we need, and it has oichel, which is invalid for schach, says the Braisa, kulam, by all of the above cases, im psoilus, meruba oichel, and if you have more waste than food, then it's bittul beroif. And by the way, guys, here, even though you could differentiate between the oichel and the psoilus, is a big chiddush here, but let's go weiter. Then ksheira, but v'mlav, if it's not more psoilus, then it's possible. However, no. When I agree with the principle, you have to look for the majority. But don't just look branch versus food. Since the branch closest to the fruit is called yad, now how many millimeters, inches, I don't know, but that's the concept. And Achedim clearly hold that the Yodayim are still called Yodayim or Yadois, and therefore they also have a status of food. So how much more straw do you need against the kernel? Not just straw kernel. You need more straw than kernel and yad. In other words, acherim, when they see that there is still yadois here. You still have a handle here. Mamash, that's great. That should be the machlekes tanoim. So my lav hakamifligi. The mar saver das acherim that yesh lahem yadois, and yadois therefore also has a status of oicholin, which by sukkah is a problem. For schach is a problem. So when you have to do bittul b'roiv that everyone agrees to, you have to have a lot more psoilis. Umar saver the Tanakama holds ein lahem yadois. Why is that? And that will be the base of Rabbi Menashe bar Gada. Because since when you harvest it for schach, that in itself nullified the whole status of yadois. Says the Gemara like this, according to Rav Abba that we just said, that Rav Abba who said haboitzer legas will not agree with hakoitzer. Rav Abba will hold that it by ktsira, it will still have a status of yad, because you still want to have the kernels. Taka vaday tanoyi. And even though Rab Abba will have to agree that one Tana disagrees with him, but at least he has whom to lean on, when he only says his din by haboitzer and dafka not by hakoitzer. But let Rav Menashe bar Gada lema that he must say that it's a machlokes tanoim, and the Gemara says he does not have to say so. Amalach Rav Menashe to kula alma savri. I'll go with my shita. That if when you cut it lischach, that was your intention while you harvested it, everyone will agree that ein lo yadois, because since you don't want it, you want to weighs it down. It's not, you don't want it. You don't want oichel for it. No one wants oichel for schach. Why is there a machlekes over here? That when this person harvested, whether it was the figs, whether it was the vines, whether it was the straw, whether it was the dates, he did it to eat. When he harvested, it was still oichel. And once you want it for food, it has yadois. There are handles. What happened is that now it happened to be out of Sukkot, and now you chapt oi gewalt, I need to have schach. That you, with your intent, the nimlach aleim, you reconsidered, and you said, you know what, I'm going to use some of it for my schach. So here, when you are changing its status from oichel to schach, it was only an intent. You reconsidered in your mind. You didn't yet do a maisa. You didn't do an action into it. That is the issue. Now, so why will the Chachamim hold that that there's no more yadois? And you're going to say, that's the whole vart. The vart is that a machshava has the power to change its classification. You can't tell me that. That's the whole point. That since the nimlach aleim, since you reconsidered, and that's a change in your intention, that's a change in your mind. Lesichuch, but your original machshava, your original designation lachila was changed as well. Is there such an opinion? In other words, before it was susceptible to becoming tamei. Even if it didn't become tamei, Rashi in the end points out, that's not the point. If something halachically was considered yadois, and it was halachically something susceptible to becoming tamei, it was something that halachically is a conduit for tuma. Can just a change in your intent change its halachic status? It cannot be. No one agrees to that. No one agrees to that. V'hatanan kol hakelim daf yudalit yardim lo yetuma b'machshava. So that will be the great example that Rashi gives, that we always quote, that you are tanning hide. Guys, a hide is not a keli. But once it's a completed product, now it's completed, it's going to be used the way it is, that's called a keli. Benegeya, not benegeya, sichuch. Benegeya dinamov can be susceptible to becoming tamei. So here you have a hide. Rashi gives two examples. That at a certain point in the tanning process, that piece of now tanned leather could be used for a dargosh, for a bed mat. I'm reading inside the top Rashi, as it is. It could be used for a dulviki, for a tabletop. Could be used. Or you can keep on working with this piece of leather and make it into straps. So you are the owner. This is the rule. If you came to this point and you said, you know what? I'm going to use it for a tabletop. That intent, not because you trimmed the edges, just your machshava is yordin l'deituma b'machshava. Since you're the owner, or you're the uman, you're the craftsman, you intended for this to be used as it is, it's called a completed product. But the Mishnah writes, but what happens if you reconsider and you say, you know what, I'm going to make it into straps? That intention cannot change the status anymore. Now that it's susceptible to becoming tamei, you know how you'll change it, the status? If you begin cutting it, or at least if you stick the knife in it to cut it into straps. You have to do some physical action with this item. Why? Because listen, this is a Mishnah and Kalim. Because Maisa, an action, it can reverse the effect of a previous action. And certainly, an action can reverse miyad machshava. It can reverse the effect of a previous intent, because Maisa is stronger. But machshava ain't a moitze. Not only loy miyad Maisa, that's for sure not. But here the Mishnah is saying, V'loi miyad machshava, a new intent cannot undo a prior intent. So how can there even be, if that's the pshat in the Braisa, that you harvested it l'dei achila, just because you reconsidered, that should not change its status. And v'chitema, that the Mishnah you're quoting from Kalim is a lakula alma, that's because we're speaking about Kalim. Kalim is something more chashuv. So, when it comes to something more chashuv, so a thought cannot negate a prior thought designation, right? Because the chashivi. But maybe yada is to begin with. A yad is to begin with, not something that important. It's a weak designation. Aval yad is the l'tzoydech achila nino are not that significant. They're not oichel. The only l'tzoydech achila, maybe at least that will be the pshat that b'machshava nase, that if it only became designated as yad l'oichel only through intent. So then, ube machshava salka, you can reconsider it. That cannot be, because v'hatanan, we learned in Uksin, clearly, kol yodoy so'icholin, anything that's classified as a handle for food. Shebisasa, now the word is very important. That shebisasa means that it was broken up, and we'll see soon what that means. And they were broken up on the threshing floor. Once they were broken, they are no longer susceptible, because they are no longer considered the yad. But Rabbi Yossi disagrees. Now let's see what's the pshat. Bishloima, guys, the second last narrow line, Lamanda Amr, the one that interpreted that Mishnah in Uksin, that basasan means actually hitir agudan, that you untied the binding of the sheaves. That means you didn't change it. Then you're right. Untying the sheaves, that's the nakuda, does not affect a physical change in the stems. Untying the sheaves only demonstrates that you don't want them in sheaves, that you're going to be crushing them, and therefore you want to crush them to get rid of the straw. Actually, that will be great, because then at least you have a shita machloikis whether your machshava will reverse its designation or not. But according to the Manda Amar, that teaches that when you have a machloikis only besas, and you actually have to physically crush the straw. A maisa can change its designation, but not a non-maisa. So ma'ikala meimar. In other words, clearly you see that the Tanach requires an act. And before besasan, it will continue to be a tamei. Answers the Gemara, I'm standing our understanding. Let's go back to Braisa regarding schach. We said good. You harvested it l'dei oichel. Because Rav Menashe Bar Gado holds that lekula alma, if when you harvest it l'schach, there's no yados. No one debates that. Elama, you did it la'oichel. So now it has the status of a yad. Now you want to change its status. It's not just because you decided to use it for the schach. The case is that you began to manipulate that branch, which began to disconnect the fig from the branch, or the straw from the kernel. That's why the Chachamim hold you don't need to be mevatel the yad. There's no more a yad, because you did a physical act. If that's the case, then why would the Achedim disagree with that? If you did a physical act, it should nullify the status of yadis. Why do you have to have enough straw more than the oichel and the yad? Why is there a yad? The Amar answers the Gemara. The Amar Rabbi Yossi, because Achedim will hold like Rabbi Yossi in our Mishnah over here, and Rabbi Yossi says mitama. So here you also see that even though you crushed it, still it has a din of a yad. So Achedim and Rabbi Yossi have the same opinion. The Gemara is not done yet. 1 second, how can you compare one case to the other? Bishleima Hassam. Hassam means in the case of the straw on the threshing floor, the case that we learned over here from Uktzin, Talmud Rabbi Yossi is because it's still Tameh, because you still have some benefit from the straw, as taught by Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, that when you are threshing, and during the threshing process, you want to turn over the kernels with a pitchfork. So the more substance, the easier it is to turn it over. So it's still a yad, epis. It's not a mama, it's a minor benefit. Let's use that. But over here, if you decided to take these stalks and to use it as chach, so there is no benefit. So lamai chazia, there has to be at least a minor benefit. So the Gemara says no. Also chazia, it gives you some benefit, because the lechisasad leminkat lohu, when you will dismantle the sukkah and you want to take the schach off, it helps you grasp it. Gavaldik. So bottom line is, what we learned is that everyone is moida. That machshava cannot be moitzi midei maisa. But if there is a maisa moitzi midei maisa, ha maisa ikar. Guys, to be continued.